Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Barber Motorsports Park for round 3 in season 3 of the Radical Esports Cup of 2026. 2 rounds so far here on Friday nights. Our broadcasted races here at 2100 GMT have brought out 2 different winners, Jake Williams and Brandon Hawking, each beating the other to the victory at Road America and the Nürburgring respectively. Well, what's going to happen this time around at Barber Motorsports Park? Let's find out and get into it. Myself, Ian O'Leary, joined by Alex Goldsmith this week, and glad to have you alongside me, Alex, for this very, very difficult racetrack. But these Radicals are small enough, agile enough, and I think raceable enough to make even this circuit pretty interesting.
Yes, you very good evening. This track is really going to be a testing one, like you say. A lot of straights, but also a lot of places to overtake. But then when it comes into the final part of the complex here through the last 4 corners is when you see the biggest elevation change. I think it's like 80 feet of incline that they've got to go through. But yeah, I mean, these SR10s always do pack a punch. They're mighty, they're powerful, but it's going to be a good one tonight.
It certainly is, and it starts a run of races, really, on very technical racetracks, really. Next week, Imola. Week after that, Road Atlanta. Then we return back to the Grand Prix-style circuit at Silverstone to bring us to the halfway mark of the season, which is the sort of circuit that we had last week at the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit. As I mentioned in the intro, Brandon Hawking taking the victory on that occasion, Jake Williams in second place. Those are the real 2 front runners, really, whether you look at the iRacing or RaceSpotTV standings. In the official standings, there's only 2 points between them. Now, it's very early on in the season, and the standings are unlikely to look like this by the end. However, they are 2 points apart for now. Kjetil Larson's been having a good under-the-radar season so far, 21 points back. And then Peter Ivany, the only other driver I think you can say he's had a good start so far. Then there's a bit of a gap back to the rest. James Barry is 5th, ahead of Max Davies, Ollie Gullickson, Alfredo Marlo, Romain Faux, and Brett Accord rounding out the top 10 in the official iRacing standings. And in our RaceSpotTV standings, this is made up of just the races that we broadcast here at 2100 GMT on a Friday night. It's Jake Williams and Brandon Hawkins, since they've had the same results through the first 2 weeks. They're also on the same points. Peter Ivany is just behind them. It rather reflects the official standings, really, doesn't it? James Barry and Kjetil Larson rounding out the top 5. Then a few different names. Max Davies, Javier Gullickson, Robert Woodward, Michael Mercesia, and Florian Horvath rounding out the top 10 there. Just to give you an idea, each week every top 10 gets points for the RaceSpotTV standings, and we try and put them in the fairest way possible to give us the standings by the end of the season, just based on our Friday night results, which last season was won by Andre Castro. Even though he was missing for quite a few rounds, he did win 5 out of the first 7, which very much powered him along towards getting the most points last time out. So far, he's not been here this season in the top 10, and I don't think that has changed here tonight. We've got, again, a number of the normal names, if you like, from the Radical Esports Cup world. James Barry on the pole is certainly one of those, but Brandon Hawking currently alongside has really had a good start to the season as well, and it's weird how in these iRacing seasons these things work, because the iRacing officials are so constant. There's only 4 weeks off per year, but with week 13 and so on. However, it does feel, one season to the next feels very, very different, and when you have a good start to the season like Brandon Hawkins has had here, seemingly giving him quite a lot of confidence going forward. But we'll talk about him in a moment. We're about to see the starting grid ready for tonight's race, and Brandon Hawkins, is alongside James Barry, who's taken that pole position. Max Davies and Diogo Perez on the second row there, with Kjetil Larson and Peter Ivany, another 2 good starters starting on row 3. Heinz Braun and Michael Mercedes on row 4, ahead of Dennis Kirk-Polos and Chris Wertz rounding out the top 10. Romain Faux and Ole Henrik Gullickson still within a second of pole. Stuart Geddes, the final driver, though he did not set a time. 13 drivers in the field, ready for that run down in towards a very difficult first section here. Alex, you mentioned the final complex being difficult. The first complex, likewise, very tricky indeed.
Yes, it goes into a very fast left-hander, and then all of a sudden you're on the brakes, turn it right through turns 2 and 3, and then it's on the power, and then a hard braking zone into a very tight left-hander at turn 5. So you've got to get that first sector right to really get the lap together, and it's all about that start.
It's all about that launch off the line in the Radical Esports Cup. Always standing starts. always sort of in the daytime. We've got decent conditions here, sunlight actually compared to qualifying, where it's a little bit gloomy. Just after 8 o'clock in the morning on the 4th of July, so an early holiday for the Americans among those on the session. But anyway, 28 degrees Celsius, nothing to write home about particularly. That's low 80s Fahrenheit. Just waiting for Chris Wetz to fill that gap on the grid there in 10th place, where he's qualified here. He's the lowest rated driver as far as iRating is concerned, so if he can even stay there, to be honest, he'll be moving up in those standings as well. But he is taking his time to get himself onto the grid, ready for 19 laps of racing around this circuit. As always, just under half an hour, these races on Friday nights. The biggest or most strong, I guess, strength of field in the Radical Esports Cup throughout the week is right here. Radical's drivers ready to go again for week 3 of season 3 in 2026. Well, but we are underway, and it's a decent stop from James Barry, who's immediately able to pull across over Brandon Hawkin in towards turn number 1. Down in towards the first couple of corners, already been just being kicked up in the background, and a big dive in there from, looks like Max Davies, who's got a little bit wide, Perez, excuse me, who's got a little bit wide. Davies just cuts underneath him and gets straight back into 3rd place, but here's that big braking zone, down in towards turn 5, and there's a bit of contact between them. There's a lock-up. They're almost both off the road. Max Davies holding the inside line, he's going to hold the position, but Perez is still just about there. He's going to have to give it up eventually, and here comes Kenton Larson on the other side. As further back, Roman Fo's had trouble. They dive in towards this tricky chicane now at the end of another straight, and Max Davies eventually holds on to that position in a real yo-yo battle with Diogo Perez.
Yeah, there's also been a bit of musical chairs between Peter and Baggy and Heinz as well. Mikael the Maltese driver dropped down to 12th position, now up into P10. Yeah, but like you say, Roman's throwing up a bit of a drama in the early stages of these 19 laps. You just see, it's just a little bit of side-to-side contact, and all of a sudden gets turned around on the apex, and that is not what the Canadian really needed.
Looks like Kyriakopoulos, I would say, who we made side-to-side contact with there. Towards turn 5, you referenced it at the start, but it's such a deep braking zone there, downhill, always makes it very difficult, such a sharp turn, and the circuit, this compound, I guess, doesn't really actually stretch a very large space, but it does make the most of it. It twists and turns around like a piece of spaghetti dropped on the floor. It is very, very tight in places. Here's Perez again with Max Davies, and that, well, I thought was the battle of the opening lap. I mean, there was drama going on further behind, but I think really showing the merits of that first sector there, Davies and Perez, almost as if they were advertising the circuit for great fights through the first sector there. You dive deep into one corner, your exit's compromised out of the next, and that's the characteristic of this racetrack, which really made that battle there.
Yeah, I think behind them had Kenton Larson, Peter and Baggy, Heinz Brown going 3 wide just behind them. So people are definitely going with their elbows out while they're using the SR10s, but James Barry is being closed in on by Brad Hawkin. The gap is about just under 4 tenths. And you can see that James Barry takes a little bit of a different line into that right-hander that we just saw. It's a bit of the Alabama roller coaster, so to speak, as we come across the line to complete another tour of the circuit. But again, James Barry has always been rapid behind the wheel of an SR10, and that's why he always will, he's on pole position, he's at the front end of the field, he will control the race to the best of his ability. However, when you've got hard chargers like Hawkin, Davies, Perez, Larson, Ivanyi, Brown, Kyriakopoulos, Mancheka's now closing in on the number 13 of Chris Betts, who's rounding out the time P9 at the moment. There's the biggest gap, so Betts is about 1.1 seconds behind Kyriakopoulos in 8th, but here we go, Hawkin really starting to size up Barry for that move for the race lead. He's right on his rear.
Yeah, he's really looking now, and just losing a bit of time through that chicane there, where it is difficult to follow through turn 9 and 10. But if you get into the mirrors through one turn, you can throw James Barry off for the next couple of turns, as this racetrack always one corner feeding into the next. There's another look from Hawkin there, which is just going to make Barry think about this, and he does cut in front nicely in time for this run to the start-finish line. And in the background, Max Davies is catching up to them both as well. So that's something worth thinking about here for James Barry. It might actually be not the worst thing in the world for him to properly defend this from Hawkin, because he can invite Davies into this, and that gives Hawkin an extra thing to think about.
Yeah, just seeing Davies' last lap time is 1 minute 17.369, so he's quicker than the two in front. Over 2 tenths quicker than the race leader. And here under braking, Davies, the man from Denmark, getting very, very close under braking, but just not getting the traction down early enough. And sometimes when you get the braking right, you stumble halfway through the corner, you can lose a couple of tenths, but through the chicane, down the hill again, once more, Davies is coming into this. I think it won't be that much longer, probably a couple of laps or so before Diego Perez starts making a quartet battling for the race lead, but Barry still keeping Hawkin at bay. And you can see just how clean Hawkin is going through the corners, and Barry is like, okay, I've got to make this car wider than an articulated lorry on the M25 at the minute. So, and the different lines that they're taking, Hawkin is really good at those bigger radiuses to really close up the corners on James Barry for the race lead.
He's putting the pressure on, and be looking at the lap count here and thinking, well, this is a very long way to go. But so far he's dealt with the pressure very, very well, and he hasn't folded under it, although we are only on lap 5, as I say, of 19. Down on the brakes again for turn 5. Hawkin too far back for a real dive there, and it would have been a proper dive. He's got a decent exit, but again, it's difficult coming in towards turn 7. Very strangely named section here. Right-handed, then a real bounce over the curb, and then a even sharper right-hander again down the hill. This is Stuart Geddes, meantime, who's the only driver having to come into pit lane so far. Hits that curb on the inside very hard through turn 11 and ends up in the wall on the outside. That is a place where you can certainly have trouble, and that's the place where Hawkin has decided to get in the mirrors, and he has thrown James Barry off now. He's wide, and here comes Hawkin to the inside, looking for this race lead. He's still there, is Barry, and he's got to hold it around the outside here, but Hawkin won't let him. He dives deep, coming into the penultimate turn, and Barry is struck back into second place, and Brandon Hawkin takes the race lead. It's 5 laps of pressure that eventually tells, and he gets into the front of this race.
Yeah, that's also brought along Davies and Perez for the ride. So 4 cars now battling for the race lead on lap 6 out of 19. You can see that Perez closing significantly on the rear wing of Davies in the number 10 car. So the battle for not just first and second, but third and fourth, and then Kjetil Larsen and Peter Ivagny. All I've got is this sentence, Ewan. Here comes the cavalry.
Indeed, there is going to be, if this race for the lead really develops as it was, with Barry leading, only with Hawkin in the front instead, then there could be something really happening here, and that was close. Perez there hits the back of Max Davies. It was more than close. There was contact. Thankfully for Perez, he was able to save it from going around completely, but my goodness, he got away with one there. Yeah, this really could be a top 7, but they have to get on terms and put the pressure on Hawkin very quickly, because James Barry, he didn't look like he had the speed of Hawkin when he was leading, and early signs are that he doesn't have the pace to stay with him now that he's behind either.
Yeah, and it's got to be about, you know, using those chess pieces, so to speak. You can just see in the background, Kjetil Larsen, Peter Ivagny, Heinz Brown. I mean, you look at the top 7, they are not that far apart. And when you consider the top 7 now covered by 2.9 seconds, it has been mightily close. But the only one that's really made some inroads, and he's starting to pull away, is Brandon Hawkin from James Barry. So it's about how far the Canadian will stretch that advantage in the next couple of laps. But there's always that opportunity of someone like James Barry who can close in when he can try and see if he can maybe close that radius on the corners.
Well, let's see if anybody's going to be seeing Brandon Hawken again here. Would be a back-to-back after winning at the Nürburgring in our broadcasted race last week on Friday. Oh, Jake Williams here today to challenge him. The two of them have blocked out the first and second position. In fact, the podium has been the same, just in a different order for the last 2 weeks. Peter Eveny on the third step on both occasions. He's at the moment just outside the top 5 back there in 6th place, and see him in the lime green. Not to be confused with the dark green of Kjetil Larsen, who's in 5th place at the moment. But it's settled down just a little bit. When Barry was at the front of the group, it was really starting to stack up. Not anymore, and again Max Davies goes wide around the carousel of turns 2 and 3, and again he gets away with it really. Perez not close enough to capitalise, but it does feel like this group is just stretched a little bit. The elastic stretching right now at the hands of Brandon Hawken.
Yeah, so now the gap between Hawken and Barry is now nearly 8 tenths. Davies getting closer and closer under braking as we ride on board picture in picture with Diego Perez, currently still sitting in 4th position, trying to close that 3.5-10 gap between himself and Davies. So this could be a good run here for the final step of the podium, but it just depends on how quickly Perez can close that gap.
Big slide over the top there. That was very good car control through turn 12 and into 13. That's the way you have to do it in these radicals, over the crest of the hill there. Just got to control somehow over the crest as the car gets a bit light. Did that expertly that time round as they home in on half distance here. Halfway around the next lap they will be exactly at half distance. But that gap for Brandon Hawken now has extended over a second. Say that this race lead is very unlikely to go to anybody else other than Hawken now. It will take a mistake from Hawken to bring everybody back into this, I would say, because Barry doesn't seem up to it right now, and the likes of Davies and Perez have got to get past Barry before they can give chase to the race leader, and these races are not that long to really give you a chance to go and do that.
Especially in a circuit like this where you can see that around the layout of Barber Motorsports Park, it's difficult to find that spot to overtake, but Brandon Hawken found a chink in the armour of James Barry and has then completely exploited when the number 3, I think it was, might have been going through turns, I think it was 7, well it was through 7 to 8 through the chicane. That's where James Barry was going a little bit wider as Romain Poe, all on the replay, nearly into the back end of Ole Henrik Gullikson there, and goes straight off into the gravel. So a turnaround at turn 1, and the number 9 just has a big old moment off the circuit. So that really has put paid to trying to get anywhere near the top 10.
Yeah, that's his second bit of trouble tonight. Although, good to see him on the webcam. Big thanks to him and anybody else who's sharing with us here today. That's quite a display he's got going on in the background there. Lights all around, maybe a model Porsche, maybe even a Lego Porsche, I don't know. But
yeah, that looks like a Lego Technic version of Rexy there from IMSA. So judging by the scheme on it. So someone's definitely got his colours organised with the RGBs.
Yeah, lots of colours in there. Very good. Big thanks to him and everybody else who gives us their point of view over the course of these broadcasts. Always helps to bring it home to us a little bit more. As this race at the front just stretches out a little bit more again. Brandon Hawken through halfway this race now has pulled away from James Barry by 2.5 seconds, and the gaps in between the likes of Davies and Perez are also, and Larsen and all the rest, are also extending here. I mentioned the elastic stretching. Well, it has snapped for the leader, I would say. For the others, it's still under tension right now as the positional changes, a lack of positional changes really in the top 7, but that's what you'd expect, to be honest, from Barber Motorsports Park. Just that change for the lead for Brandon Hawkin and James Barry, it is a difficult place to overtake round here.
Yeah, the biggest loser has been Malta's Mikhail Machika in 10th position as we get the rear view on board from Chris Betts, who's actually got the Maltese driver right behind him. Machika has been quite successful in national competitions within the world of sim racing, but he's trying to close that gap, which is about 2.5 tenths as they go through the chicane in turns 7, 7A and 7B, and then quickly through 8. So again, it's through this fast left-hander, slightly uphill here through turns 9 and 10, and then it's a long run and a slight descent here going into turn 11, and then you're up a climb again. So it's really interesting to see the topography of Barber Motorsports Park when you think about how long this circuit has been around for, just over 2 decades. But still, it's quite a fast track to run around here. Quickest laps we're seeing at the moment, I mean, Brandon Hawkin is just under 1 minute 17.220.
It's a best of the session, only a personal best. SMS coming in quite a lot across the board, actually. All of the top 3 going quicker and quicker. I mean, as the fuel load gets lighter, it's not getting particularly old. Those are likely to happen. Now, Kjetil Larsen's under a bit of pressure here. Peter Even's finally been able to look at getting a top 5 and retain a top 5 run throughout every single race on Friday night so far this season. He looks to the outside there. He's not quite going to manage that. Kjetil Larsen was 6th place last week, and Eveny trying to demote him to that very same position here as Heinz Brunn closes in the background as well, looking for his first top 10 of our season on Friday nights as well. This is very much split off into groups now under the pressure of Brandon Hawkin out front, and it is Eveny who's looking the most likely to be making this overtake right now.
Yeah, it does look very close to facilitating the move, but one wrong move from him could open it up for Heinz Brown as we actually ride on board with the man from Germany, picture in picture down at the bottom of the screen, as they're going to come across the stripe here and heading to the fast left-hand kick here at turn 1, downhill, and then a little bit of adverse cam to the left-hand side. You can see the rear tail lights of rear brake lights of Peter Evany's car just flickering as he just modulates the brake pedal, and the amount of strength of field that we've got here tonight, Ewan, is so exemplary of how close the racing has been. But I'm not going to, count my chickens before they hatch and say who might get the win in the battle for P5, even though that would be still a good amount of points heading into Imola next week.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a toss-up here. Of course, the stats I was just reading out a lap ago or about our races here on Friday nights, but as you say, points very important in official standings as well. This is the most valuable time slot normally for a week of Radical Esports Cup racing. So if you want to be up towards the top, at least on 2/3 of the occasions in the season, you've got to be here on a Friday, where all the big names come out to play. And we're seeing that again here. In the background, you can see Kirikopoulos, Wets and Mercesia in the background there. There is Kirikopoulos just at the head of this group. For 8th place, another 3 driver group. Stuart Geddes, by the way, down the field has got back out there again after 6.5 minutes of repairs. So far, everybody still in this race. Trouble for Geddes through turn 11. A little bit earlier on as Wets holds on from Mercesia there. That's not a very good exit though, and there might be not quite the run for Mercesia, who has to stay behind through this rather strange chicane at the end of the straight. Bit of a stalemate now. Final 5 laps coming up in just a couple of moments' time. Brandon Hawkin comfortably leading this race, and I would say James Barry comfortably holding on to second. He is still under pressure from Max Davies, but he looks comfortable with that pressure at the moment, and there's only 5 laps to go now. The end is in sight for James Barry.
Yeah, he's just got to hang on to it as best he can, but if there's a mistake from him, then either Davies or Perez, who still round out the top 4, and they pretty much it's been James Barry who put it on pole. Brandon Hawking getting through with that move within the first 6 to 7 laps of the race. And Barry's just decided, you know what, this is early days. You know, we've still got plenty of rounds left in the series. So I just need to... He's very good at managing in terms of points. You know, just thinking, okay, I need to get firsts, I need to get seconds, I need to get thirds. I don't need to completely go all guns blazing until we get to the tail end. And then if I need to go and pick up a win, then I've got to bust a gut to try and make something special happen. As once again we concentrate on the battle picture down at the bottom of the screen. Kessel Larsen, Peter Devanier, Heinz Brown battling away over P5. The Dane still, well, the Norwegian holding on at the minute ahead of Ivanier, who we've seen, you know, get ever closer to the rear wing of the number 5. So I think that Ivanier, if he gets a little sniff of an opportunity, he might try for a late send. But is the risk worth the reward?
Yeah, exactly. There's quite a lot of risk attached always round here. So is he going to... well, was that his chance earlier on? We saw his side-by-side moment earlier on where he was really putting the pressure on Larsen. Is that going to remain all the way his last opportunity, or is there going to be one more chance? Same for Max Davies as well, who's rather sat here for a while. Larsen bringing this pressure upon himself now by defending in towards turn 5, though. Maybe that will offer some encouragement to Ivanier that he can go for this without too much risk in the last few moments. He's not close enough in towards this chicane coming up now, but always encouraging when you're the driver trying to make a move, and there's a driver willing to take defensive lines like that, needlessly actually, from Larsen. Needlessly going on the defensive there.
Yeah, and Brown's just waiting for his opportunity. If he can make something stick, it might be the fact that if Ivanier goes for a move and Braun sees the door opening, it could be a very spicy end to the race, but it's still at that stalemate where Larsen's keeping the car as wide as humanly possible. Ivanier's waiting for his move. Brown's just waiting for the Reese, trying to see if he can get past, but at the moment the German's not able to facilitate anything, as we've only got a handful of laps to go.
Exactly. There's just not that much time remaining, and there's just not many opportunities around this racetrack. That big stop in towards turn 5 is the main one, and maybe that's why Larsen is going for some overly cautious defensive lines there. You can see him braking there on a different line to everybody else. That camera shot illustrating just how he's turning in for that early apex there, at least taking defensive line through the braking zone. Gives Ivanier a better run on the exit, but it's just not the corner to have an exit off of, really. He can't really lunge anybody coming in towards turn 7. Not without an accident, anyway. And Ivanier just forced to stay behind. Only 2 laps to go at the end of this one. And you'd say the chances of Ivanier, or indeed anyone, making this happen, because Davies is quite close to Barry as well, the chances are slimming out now in the final couple of laps.
Yeah, if you're going to go for a move, you've got to really sort of decide if it is worth it, or if you just decide, you know what, I'll just grab the points. And with it, as we've seen over the last 17 laps with 2 to go, it's going to be a tough one. But if Davies can go a little bit later on the brakes in comparison with Barry, and Perez trying to do the same on Davies, well, who knows what that might bring in terms of potential battles. But still, Ivanier is the closest to anybody, you know, in terms of proximity, and that's Larsen in P5. So from many respects, you would have to say that Ivanier, he's getting to within that 10th and a half of a second window, but now it's expanded again. So Larsen, I think, is right in what you were saying, Ewan. He's braking earlier, then making sure that the car is parked to make the easiest transition through the corners, thereby mitigating the opportunities for Ivanier as they fast run out.
And the back end of the circuit again. Max Davies really out wide there over the curb on the outside. Well, they sweep downhill here. Look at how close Ivanier is here. Following very closely from Larsen, and maybe there is a chance for a lunge here, and Larsen knows it. He's got to be wary of what's going on in his mirrors there. as even he continues to apply the pressure, but they go over the stop finish line. The white flag's waving. There's only one more lap to go, and only a few more chances now for Davies and Evany especially to make something happen here.
Oh, as it looks like Davies ran a little bit wide going through into turns 2 and 3. So whether that's helped Diego Perez to close in on his rear wing, but time and corners are fast running out for the man in 4th.
Again, a defensive shape from Larson. A little look for the first time from Heinz Braun coming down the inside there in towards turn 5. But he couldn't quite do it. He's got that problem of being the third of a 3 and being unable to really get involved so far. Well, he may be trying to the final corners, but on the top of the screen, Brandon Hawkin is coming through to another race victory. He has taken the Radical Esports Cup by storm in this season. He hadn't won a race with us for some time in the earlier part of this season. Well, now he's got 2 in 2 weeks. Winner at the Nürburgring last week by breaking the elastic and stretching it out ahead of the rest of the field. Winner here at Barber Motorsports Park by doing exactly the same. It's back-to-back on Friday nights for Brandon Hawkin, who this time finishes ahead of James Barry and Max Davies, who get their first podiums of the season. And it is Larson who holds on behind as well, ahead of Evany. Kyriakopoulos is going to hold off ahead of Mercier as well, who passed Chris Wetz earlier on in this race. But a very calm and controlled drive from Hawkin, who goes back-to-back in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, an impressive drive from the number 1. Just made good his opportunities, and when he saw the opportunity to get through on James Barry, he took full advantage of it.
It's 3 seconds in the end for Brandon Hawkin, who takes the victory ahead of James Barry. Max Davies couldn't quite get past Barry in the end, and neither could Diogo Perez. Ketil Larson was at the head of the next group in front of Peter Evany and Heinz Braun. Dennis Kyriakopoulos held off from Mikko Mercier and Chris Wetz, who rounded out the top 10. Ole Henrik Gulliksen and Romain Faux were the last ones to get on the to the finish on the lead lap. Stuart Geddes retired. Had a long stop, which put him 5 laps down in this race here today. We'll just hang on for a moment to hope that at least a few of the drivers from the podium will come to join us. But yeah, that was a race that you'd expect from Barber Motorsports Park. Actually, I was expecting a few more overtakes, got to say, from these Radicals. However, it's just a difficult circuit to overtake on, and sometimes that's very difficult to get away from.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the elevation changes, sometimes, you know, if you're not in that state of flow, getting round corners, you might slightly overjudge your braking distance, your acceleration point coming out of the corners. It can be a tough one, but, I mean, Brandon Hawkin, as soon as he got away from James Barry, it was just clean sailing and on cruise control until the end of the race.
It certainly was. It was a very, very controlled race indeed. Let's chat to James Barry, who was giving chase throughout much of that race and end up in second place. James, welcome in. Good to have you with us, and congratulations on second place. You were the only driver one of 2 drivers in the top 7 to change position in that race, in a very difficult race to overtake. You out-qualified Brandon Hawkin, but he outraced you, as it were, in the race. Was that a dynamic you were expecting, or were you surprised with pole position maybe tonight?
Wait, can you hear me, guys? Oh, hi.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, not necessarily. I had no idea what to expect coming into the race because I didn't know the pace of anyone really. So I wasn't exactly surprised to get pole. And then I was quite optimistic about my chances, especially after the first kind of 3-4 laps. I was quite happy. But then I gradually realised that Brandon was definitely a little bit faster than me in some places, and then he caught right up to the back of me. And then just had this moment where he looks to the inside and I get the spotter call that says car left, so I kind of leave the space in a really bad position that compromises me for the next turn, and I just really annoyed with myself that I kind of jumped out of the way and just rolled over, gave him the lead. Yeah, obviously he was quite a bit faster than me in the end, but obviously I really thought I would be able to put on a good defense against him and really test myself against a top driver like Brandon is. So yeah, a bit of a shame that it panned out the way it did. Apart from that though, yeah, it was fun to drive this track.
Well, maybe that answers in part my my next question, but it did seem like when Brandon was behind you that it was inevitable almost that he would get past. When there were others queuing up behind you for second place, which they were for the rest of the race, it looked almost impossible for them to get past you. So how would you explain that dynamic? Was it just all down to that moment? And had that moment not happened, do you think, would you rate your chances quite highly of actually being able to hold on all the way?
I don't know about highly, but at least I'd have been able to have a go and just find out the hard way if I'd been able to do it. But it's just about raw pace, really. Every tenth counts, really. I mean, Brandon was just 2-3 tenths faster than myself, and I think the guys behind as well. If you don't have that kind of advantage, then you're just going to be stuck behind the guy in front as long as he doesn't make mistakes. So I was just trying to keep my head straight, not make any big mistakes, and I knew I could come home for second place.
Well, congrats on that second place here tonight, James, and thanks for coming to chat to us at the end of the day as well.
But yeah, cheers guys, thanks for watching, see you later.
Very much James Bowie in second place here tonight, joining us there. Unfortunately, the other podium guys will not join us for interviews here tonight. Hopefully we'll hear from the future, especially Brandon Hawkin, who's really taking this season by storm. 2 victories in the last 2 weeks. Come back next week to see whether he can make it 3 in 3. Imola is the next round of this championship on July 10th. That's at 2100 GMT, as always, here on the iRacing and RaceSpotTV YouTube channels, here for the Radical Esports Cup. Thanks very much for joining us here tonight from Barber Motorsports Park for the 3rd round of Season 3 in 2026. I've been Ewan O'Leary alongside Alex Goldschmidt, with Romero Augustin Cisneros behind the cameras of this RaceSpotTV and iRacing broadcast here from Barber Motorsports Park. We'll see you in 1 week's time in Imola. Goodbye for now.